Hang on, sorry. Oh no, he's opened the door.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, my dear brothers and sisters. Welcome to our first session on Quranic parables. I have with me my good friend Ustad Safaruk. Assalamu alaikum, Saf. How are you?
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, Ustad. Assalamu alaikum to everyone.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Are you all right?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, bi khair. Just let's see, just waiting, and let's just share the videos on our pages and just get everybody a couple of minutes to settle down, inshallah, and we'll start with our first session very shortly. So let me just share on my own page first and see if it is all good. Yeah, it's good. I think if people can hear us and see us, give us some thumbs up, inshallah. Right, I've got people joining. How have you? How's your day been? Inshallah.
Yeah, we're well, alhamdulillah. Yeah, so just a bit busy at the moment at home, but alhamdulillah, all's good.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, very good. MashaAllah. So let me just get our introduction slide, inshallah, and then we can get cracking. So, Bismillah.
ويضرب الله الأمثال للناس لعلهم يتذكرون.
Bismillah. So, brothers and sisters, welcome, inshallah. So, this is our first show, and today is obviously the eve of Ramadan. So, Ramadan Mubarak, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this Ramadan a wonderful Ramadan, a great Ramadan for you and your family and for all the Muslims around the world. So, alhamdulillah, really looking forward to it. And hopefully those who joined us in the last session, the introductory session, where we had a bit of a discussion about what this series of shows going to be on Amthalul Quran, the parables of the Quran. And as we know, the month of Ramadan is the month of revelation, month of Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he honored this month. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينة من الهدى والفرقان. That it is in this month that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he revealed his final message, Al-Quran, as a guidance for mankind, proof of his guidance, and as a criterion. So naturally in this month, the Muslims will devote their time and energy and their efforts into spending time with the Quran, reading it, memorizing it, and studying it. And as part of that endeavor, we will, inshallah ta'ala, with you throughout the month, go through each night one of the amthal, one of the parables from the Quran. And if you just remember very briefly, I think from the last sessions, we just talked about the importance of Amthal. So maybe Ustaz Safaruk, just a quick reminder for our new audience about the Amthal al-Quran. What's its purpose, why we're doing it, and as a recap, and then we can dive straight into our first example, inshallah ta'ala.
جزاك الله خير أستاذ. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه من والاه. Yeah, so just as Ustaz mentioned last session, we kind of did a kind of introductory sort of session where we introduced the topic of Amthal al-Quran, or parables, similitudes in the Quran, that the Quran, the Quran gets its message across in many different ways, and it does it beautifully. One of the beautiful ways in which it does Allah gets his message across, Jalla wa Ala, is through using parables, where he compares one thing to another thing. So something abstract is made tangible, so we can sort of sense it, so it comes alive for us. And then we thought that, being in this blessed month, being the Shahr al-Quran, we thought one of the ways that we can have an engagement with the Quran, begin our journey with the Quran, and we hope, of course, you can join us on this journey, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, is that we try and engage with the Quran in a different way. Others are doing an engagement on one kind of level. We thought we would try and sort of take a different take and try and go through examples of the Quran, one every day, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, for a month, that opens up for us a kind of an idea or a thought, a reflection point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to get us to think about, as a kind of sort of more impactful engagement with the Quran, really. So obviously we're going to be reading the Quran bi'idhnillah in this month. We're going to be, obviously we must try and implement it in our lives as much as we can, but we also want to be reflective believers. We want to think about what Allah's trying to tell us. And one of the beautiful ways in which to do that was Amthal. And finally, we went through a sort of a basic structure of a mathal, a kind of parable. And if you missed last session, please go back to that session. But inshallah, we'll repeat some of that framework in every one of our sessions. So by the end of it, we hope it kind of cements and it becomes sort of a bit clearer or clearer in your minds, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. So brothers, if you missed the last session, you can just catch up on Facebook and just watch that introductory session for more detail. But let's jump into our first Amthal. I've got a slide. Hope everyone can see this slide. Is basically the Amthal, the parable. So what we'll do is play the slide, and there's a recitation on it as well, mashallah. One of a young Hafiz of Quran, brother Usama, he did some lovely recordings for us. So we will play that inshallah ta'ala just in a moment.
له دعوة الحق والذين يدعون من دونه لا يستجيبون لهم بشيء إلا كباسط كفيه إلى الماء ليبلغ فاه وما هو ببالغه وما دعاء الكافرين إلا في ضلال.
Barakallah feek. If you are joining us, brothers and sisters, this is our first day of Amthal al-Quran, parables from the Quran. And inshallah ta'ala, we are going to just dive in very shortly into our first parable. And the first parable, this is from Surah Ra'd, verse number 13, inshallah ta'ala. So let's just bring up the slide, and then we can actually go straight into it. Bismillah. 1 second. There we go. And Right.
So while that's happening, let me give a summary of the parable, and then we can break it down for our viewers. So as you've heard the beautiful recitation, and you can see from the meaning on the screen, that this comparison that Allah is giving, this parable, is clearly to show how that the non-believers, the disbelievers who call out to something inanimate like an idol, something that's lifeless, a lifeless object, for their needs or whatever it might be, are like those who call out to water with outstretched hands, thinking that the water will draw to their hands, i.e. it will respond, and then come to their mouths and quench their thirst. So in this parable, Allah is saying, Jalla wa ala, that just like inanimate water cannot respond to it being called, similarly idols, lifeless idols, can't respond either, let alone fulfill human needs. So we're going to break that down, inshallah, to see how Allah achieves that point. So as you can see in the screen, for those of you who were with us last session, I beg your pardon, on Monday, here's our structure, which will be familiar as we go, more and more familiar as we go along.
Ustad, just on this particular slide, there is what the verse at the top, and we've got a translation, and then we've got the components, the simile components, but also on the right hand side, some imageries. So
Yes.
it's worthwhile just reflecting on the imageries as well as we try to understand it, because every amthal is visual. It has a visual representation of something tangible which the listeners can appreciate. So here you can see on the right hand side, because the analogy that's been made in the verse is that those who call to, in this case, this is primarily addressing the mushrik Arabs at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who were pagans. They used to worship idols, and they used to call upon these idols and supplicate to these idols for their need. And that is being compared with somebody who is really thirsty, and they are in need of water, and they just stretch their hand out towards the water, believing or thinking or imagining the water would somehow reach into their mouth. So that is the comparison that's been made, and hopefully those visual imageries, they reflect that. So brothers and sisters, if you like the visual imageries, give us some thumbs up, give up some love, so that we know these imageries are effective and they're working for you. So inshallah ta'ala. So let's just go through the simile components. I'm gonna bring up my annotation so we can annotate as we actually go through it. So Ustad Saf, simile components. So we've got the 4 components. Let's crack into it, inshallah.
So now obviously this whole issue is about calling out and dua. Can you see? So supplicating or making a prayer. So that's why the first part of the verse says lahu da'watul haqq. So to Allah only, exclusively belongs anyone's sort of prayers or supplications or call. So Allah is the one who is truthfully called out to, or it could mean that the la ilaha illallah, the shahada, is what belongs to Allah alone. So we only make the shahada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no one else. But anyway, we'll go through each of the parts of the verse as we go along. So there we've got our components. So so what you've got here, remember the mushabbah bihi, wajhu shabah, and the adawatu tashbih. So who are the people who are compared? The mushabbah. So in the verse, we see that the mushabbah is the likened, that being compared, are the acts of the non-believers calling out to lifeless idols. So in the verse, that will be وَالَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِهِ. So those who call out to other than Allah, i.e. the non-believers or the mushrikun, whoever it might be. So there, Ustaz has circled it in color there. That's the mushabbah. And what are they compared to? The likened to mushabbah bihi, what are they compared to? That act of calling out to other than Allah, i.e. lifeless objects like asnam. And you can see that in the picture there that Ustaz has put there, idols. لا يستجيبون لهم بشيء إلا كباسط كفيه إلى الماء ليبلغ فاه وما هو ببالغه. So what their act of calling out to idols, Allah compares that to is someone who stretches out their hand, and Ustaz has just circled it there, you can see on the screen. كباسط كفيه إلى الماء. So it's like he outstretches his hands to water, calling it to come to his mouth, calling it to come to his mouth. But we know that can never happen. So the comparison then is being made, just to make it clear, the comparison is being made to the act of the non-believers calling out to idols, inanimate, lifeless objects, is compared to somebody who stretches his hands out, who's really thirsty, and wants water, stretches out their hands and calls to the water, come to my mouth, and the water won't come.
This is an interesting expression because, I think, when we're going into the tafsir books, they would mention that, that this is almost like a saying amongst the Arabs in terms of someone who's stretched their hands out for water, but obviously no water actually retains in their hand. So this is a phrase used amongst the Arabs when they are seeking something, but really they find nothing.
Yes, so you're right. The saying, والعرب تقول لمن طلب وما لا يجد هو كالقابض على الماء. So the phrase is that the Arabs say that when you are looking for something that can't be found, that expression is like كالقابض على الماء. It's as if you were trying to reach out to water. That's the phrase. So in other words, Allah is saying what? It's impossible. It's impossible that when you call out to idols, they're going to fulfill your need. And this is what Mujahid, one of the interpreters of the Quran, he says, أنه رجل يدعو الماء بلسانه ويشير إليه بيده فلا يأتيه أبدا. Doesn't matter how many times you call the water to come to your mouth to quench your thirst, it will never be able to do it. It won't on its own accord, because it's not a sentient creature like you and I that can understand, respond, and then move. So Allah is saying these asnam, Allah is saying he's comparing them to you stretching out your hands when you're thirsty and you need water to quench your need, but that lifeless idol can never quench your need, can fulfill your hajat, your needs, just like water can never quench your thirst when you call out to it with outstretched hands. So subhanAllah, it is so vivid.
It's almost when you think about that, it almost sounds silly and ridiculous. That is ridiculing the belief in idol worship, or thinking idols will actually satisfy your need. It's like a thirsty person just looking at water or extending it, hoping the water would somehow come to his mouth and then quench his thirst. So it's such a simplified way of showing the shallow belief of the mushrikeen.
It's like Ibrahim alayhi salam, isn't it? When he says, I think it's in Surah Maryam, alayhi salam, he says, Ya abati lima ta'budu ma la yasma' wa la yubsiru wa la yughni anka shay'a. Oh my father, why do you worship that which can't see, hear, and it can't even benefit you in the way that you want to be benefited from it? You see, so it's just so vividly put. And then when you reflect on it, it's like, it is true. It doesn't make sense at all to call out to something inanimate.
Should we just look at the simile?
Yes. So I'm sure our audience has probably picked up on what is the simile particle here. What tells us that this is a simile? So those who are looking and probably pointing to, the letter kaf. That's right. So كباسط كفيه إلى الماء ليبلغ فاه وما هو ببالغه وما دعاء الكافرين إلا في ضلال. So
in terms of the simile feature, I think this is the last component. So effectively, we are looking at the inanimate and the lifeless object like idols, which have no power to respond to anyone or anything and cannot fulfill or benefit at all. And that is being compared with the inability of water just to go to your mouth to quench your thirst. So that's where the simile feature is, to make that comparison. So yeah, so this is, you know, this is a very vivid example to show how ridiculous the belief in idol worship is. Now, I'm going to just switch slides and then and go to the next slide, inshallah, just to have a look at what are the lessons or what are the ibrah that we can actually take from this this amthal, inshallah. Just so while I do that, I mean, in terms of some of the lessons that we could actually look at for this, Ustaz Saf.
Yeah, so one of the lessons definitely that's immediately jumps out to us, of course, is that Allah is making it starkly clear, Jalla wa ala, that look, calling out to other than Allah, like idols or anything inanimate or anything abstract, anything of our own construction, can never fulfill our needs, because that's why we're surrendering ourselves to something greater, or what we think is greater than ourselves. We think it's going to fulfill our needs. And Allah is saying this is futile. It does not make rational sense, because no inanimate object has the power, has neither the power nor the knowledge to be able to fulfill our needs. Remember, it's everyone's needs. So that kind of inanimate object has to have the qualities of being able to fulfill everyone's needs, right? So it's got to be all powerful. It's got to be all knowing. It's got to know everything that every person that calls out to them to fulfill their needs. It must know all their needs in detail. Allah is saying these inanimate objects, these asnam or abstract constructions, whatever they might be, you know, they have none of these qualities. So it just doesn't make sense to call out to them.
But if somebody was to ask Ustaz Saf that, surely it's such a, you know, basic understanding that these are inanimate objects, they can't do anything. You know, how is it possible that, you know, the mushrik Arabs dedicated themselves to these stones? I mean, what's the thinking behind that?
Well, often it was they thought that, you know, they were using these idols. One of the justifications was that they weren't necessarily worshiping these idols, but they were using the idols to draw closer to Allah. So they're using them as intermediaries. But even that doesn't make sense, because the intermediary that you're trying to use, even if you want to take that argument, that's the whole point. Allah's saying they're powerless. So you calling out to them, even if your secondary intent, calling out to them is your secondary intention, your primary intention is, you know, Allah. But the fact that you're going through inanimate objects by which you're directing your need and helplessness towards, that itself doesn't make sense. You can just shift the argument. Can you see? So even if they were saying, by covering up their view, that we're only using these idols as a means, but why are you using them as a means? What for?
As if these means...
It's a bit like if I go to a statue, if I want to meet let's say I want to meet a noble or a king or the head of state, right? And I can't go directly, but I walk up to a statue in front of the palace and I say, dear statue, take me to the head of state, or take me to the king, take me to the royal, the member of the royal family that I'd like to see. Can that statue take me? It can't. So can you see? It just doesn't make sense.
So in terms of, you know, some of the reflections around this verse today, because obviously, you know, the ideology of idols, if you like, as a main way of life, which was, you know, a way of life for the Quraysh. They revolved, you know, around everything around idol worship. That was the focal point. Although, yes, you know, people do worship idols in parts of the world today. I mean, what are the lessons that we can start sort of drawing in terms of, you know, we're living a liberal, secular, highly materialistic world. from this particular verse?
Well, I mean, you know, people are inviting others to adopt a way of life, a different worldview, a different ideology. Obviously, you know, it was idol worship at that time, but nowadays it's sort of these synthetic, sort of man-made worldviews and ideologies. Whether that's like, you know, obviously capitalism being the kind of worldview that is dominant today. So we have to reflect on, you know, that these worldviews or ideologies aren't producing, you know, the sound way of life that humankind needs. So we got to show how the worldview of revelation, Islam, the ideology of Islam, is a replacement to these human constructed worldviews. So we have to show that how the failing humankind, these synthetic man-made ideologies or worldviews, and call to the correct way of life, which is the Islamic worldview. So yeah, although idol worshiping may not be the dominant view, the lesson for us is, what is the dominant view now, isn't it? What is the dominant worldview now?
I mean, the reality is that whether, you know, 7th century Arab mushrik or whether it's the 21st century materialistic man, human being have not fundamentally changed. That we feel a sense of weakness, we feel a sense of need for a power greater than ourselves to fulfill our needs. That is part of our, you know, human nature, that we have this natural need for a power beyond ourselves to help us in our times of difficulty and need. And this drive that we have, you know, we call it religious instinct or the religious inclination, that is still present today. Even though in the West, you know, it's a highly materialistic world, and even though in the West, you know, religion has taken a back seat or has been sidelined from the aspects of life, human beings, they feel that they need to look upon a power beyond themselves. I think coronavirus is a very good example where people feel there is a emptiness in their life. There is a spiritual vacuum in their life, and they need to revere, they need to worship. So at that time of the Meccan Qurayshi society, that emotion, that feeling of needing something to call upon to satisfy their needs and their wants, that was channeled towards idols. Definitely. Now today, how are people channeling that need for worship and for reverence beyond others? And I think that's where the question is for many Muslims today. We, especially living in the West, you know, people in the West are secular, people in the West are materialistic, but that need to worship, that need to fulfill that desire is still very, very strong.
Definitely, whatever means they try and find for themselves to satisfy that instinct, you know, whether that's through, you know, following celebrities, or I don't know, however people want to do it, making their own constructs up. You see, money, whatever, you know, human beings can, with their imagination, construct any ways to fulfill their needs. But what Allah is saying is that the correct power for which we direct, that can only satisfy that need, that void in us, is Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one above everything. So it's not idols, it's not your latest gadget, it's not some man, some human being, it's not some piece of nature, it's not the natural world, it's not the environment, it's not, you know, it's nothing like these things.
And we as human beings, we are in constant need of guidance. And I think one of the things which I found, if you look at, you know, the self-help industry, in terms of, you know, people are looking for guidance, you know, in their life, they're looking for meaning. So you are now finding, you know, lots of books and programs about life coaching, about self-help, and all these other things, which is trying to fill that void which historically religion had in terms
Yeah.
of providing meaning, providing purpose. And today people are going towards secular forms of guidance in order to satisfy that.
Definitely. And like I said, people then manifest different ways in which they want to fill that need, but according to how they have defined it. You see, so the Meccans defined it, and they felt that the way to define for them the object, or look towards the objects that will benefit and fulfill their need, were idols. People have replaced idols with lots of other different things. Like as we mentioned, some people go to animals, some people go to other human beings, some people go to whatever it might be that they construct. But Allah saying that all has to be, that all's got to be obliterated. It's only Him.
But there is a point here, which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, lahu da'watul haq, for Him alone is the true supplication, right?
Definitely.
And the other meaning, which is that's been mentioned, is that da'watul haq is the meaning of la ilaha illallah, the meaning of tawheed. So this is the correct call. And I think this verse shows something more interesting, which is that if your instincts or if your desire to worship is left without thinking, without really contemplating and coming to beliefs, using your mind and using evidences and proofs, and just leaving your emotions dictate how you should satisfy that, you will inevitably end up committing shirk or not believing, or
not just society, not just your emotions, but even if you leave it to society, your culture, your people, your community, your tribe, your group, your whatever, your followers and followings, that's not the way to determine what the truth is. So Allah's saying, using your aql, work it out. But it doesn't have to be worked out in this kind of logical, abstract fashion.
It doesn't have to be philosophical. It
doesn't have to.
In the Quran, exactly. Allah mentions about look at the night and the day and the alternation and its signs, which are natural things that everybody can sense and realize that there is a power, an organizer, as one who is.
But Ustad, remember when we mentioned last session that we don't, parables are more. As Ibn al-Muqaffa, he said, isn't it, that amthal are clearer, more perspicuous than even logic. Now, look how Allah, in a few words, shown us how irrational it is to call out to something that has no life to fulfill your needs.
Absolutely.
Rather than going through an elaborate argument. We need to go into that philosophizing, because the point is quite simple.
Yeah.
How are you fulfilling your needs? If you're fulfilling it through your own constructs and your own thinking, your own whims and desires, then you're gonna decide for yourself how to fulfill your need.
And the verse towards the end is very powerful. وَمَا دُعَاءُ الْكَافِرِينَ إِلَّا فِي الضَّلَالِ, that the prayer or the supplication of the disbelievers is nothing but in vain. It's all in misguidance. So again here, all of their calling, which is other than calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is going to be in terms of misguidance. And I think one of the other point that maybe we should just touch upon is that the other meaning of lahu da'watul haq, which is the meaning that la ilaha illallah, the tawheed, the essence of Islam, that is the true call. And that's an interesting point, because in that beginning of the verse, lahu da'watul haq, for Him is true supplication, and the other meaning is for Him is the truth, meaning that la ilaha illallah, there is no God but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is a statement of belief. So here, as Muslims, when we are looking at calling for the aqidah of Islam, the basis of Islam, I mean, today the comparison isn't so much about people actually, worshipping idols. Today, there is basic belief. There is a basic belief of secularism, which is the separation of religion from life's affairs. Yeah. And that is it's a universal call in the world today. So today, the Islamic aqidah is for foremost challenger or adversary or opponent is not 360 idols. It's a philosophical belief, which is that religion should be separated from life. There should be no role for religion in determining what happens in life's affairs, meaning outside the parameters of places of worship, like like masjids or church or synagogues. And you shouldn't have a say in politics or economics or in worldly affairs. So the other reflection I take from it, lahu da'watul haq. Now this is the true call to haq is la ilaha illallah. This verse is actually a challenge to secularism and the irrationality of secularism itself.
Absolutely. To be in that dominant thought now, so because the Quran obviously at each time and each age is challenging the dominant thought of the whatever time we are in. You see. So you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Barakallahu feek, Ustaz, for that one.
So, brothers and sisters, this was our first reflection. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll try to keep it short. We know it's a little bit over time we had planned, but inshallah ta'ala, we're trying to keep it as tight as possible, so it could be you can watch it and then go about your daily business. And also, please, brothers and sisters, take the time to share and invite others, and we will inshallah ta'ala will be joining you again tomorrow at 7 o'clock with another Amthal. And Ustaz Saif, I think before we wrap up, there was you gave a homework question last time.
Oh, okay, yeah. And I think you said you came back with one answer, didn't you?
Well, I had one answer, but just repeat the question. So
okay. So last lesson we gave a little homework to see what other meaning was the word for qaswara. So we know it was asad, a lion. But what were the other meanings that any of our viewers were able to find? I think you mentioned one viewer said it was.
I think one person said maybe it was hunter.
Okay, yeah. That can be found in the in the tafsir books, definitely. But there was also a meaning, and that is that the dark of the night, walamatul layl. So you will find that, in it's attributed, if I remember, to Qatada. And so, see if there's other meanings that you can find. But that I thought that stood out for me. Yeah, that meaning, because it's quite.
I think there was a third one, which was men shouting, right? Group of people shouting.
Yes, that's right. And that's what aswatuhum. That's right. So people, and their voices. So, but some people also said it relates to kibr sin, like old, so elderly. Those who are older in age.
Right.
I just got to check that. Because qaswara, without the term marbuta, is kibar sin. Kibar fi sin. So, yeah. But anyone else got any more, please dig them out. We will spare them the homework today.
No, that's fine. I think for today, what we'll say is for the brothers and sisters watching in the comments, what lessons, did you take from this particular amthal from Surah Al-Ra'd, put it into the comments, inshallah ta'ala, and then we will just see you tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
ويضرب الله الأمثال للناس لعلهم يتذكرون